Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. This webinar is organized by the KPI Urban Europe project Collaborative Housing in a Pandemic Era. Cross-country inter and transdisciplinary evaluation, innovative approaches, human rights-based policy recommendations, and capacity building. The COVID-19 pandemic has revealed that the failure to guarantee the right to adequate housing has had major consequences during this global crisis in Europe. CoHope is a response to this health, housing, and social crisis. It focuses on carrying out applied research through a mixed methods evaluation of the resilience and transformative capacities of collaborative housing projects and inhabitants in 5 European countries. Co-creating participatory design approaches for future housing development, generating recommendations for policymakers, and implementing an international capacity building program on collaborative housing that tackles the affordability integration health nexus. CoHope has an inter and transdisciplinary approach, incorporating complementary forms of knowledge through cooperation between academics and practice partners. So in summary, CoHope carries out interdisciplinary research, focusing on collaborative housing communities, with a special interest on the intersection of housing affordability, social integration, and health. We also conduct an urban living lab with a transdisciplinary approach in which academics collaborate to co-create a participatory process for planning future collaborative housing projects and to formulate recommendations to policymakers. This webinar is part of the CoHope Urban Living Lab that comprises online exchanges, study visits to collaborative housing projects in consortium countries, local workshops in Austria, Sweden, and France, a validation workshop in Vienna, online workshops at the local level in consortium countries, and the next step, it will be to carry out a policy workshop in Lyon in June 2024. The focus of today is on the CoHope participatory process for planning future collaborative housing settings. And this document, this has been a process that has been ongoing already, I would say this around 1 year, and has received feedback from stakeholders from Sweden, Austria, and France in a workshop held in December in Vienna. The feedback from practice partners has been incorporated in the draft document that has been, the main author is Robert Temel. And today we continue this discussion through receiving feedback from cooperation partners and opening up the discussion to key stakeholders in Sweden. My name is, by the way, my name is Ivette Arroyo, and I am an associate senior lecturer at Lund University. You are very welcome, and we are very happy that you joined us today. And now I give the word to Robert Temel, who will be first, he will present about the participatory process, and then Robert will receive feedback from 3 of our cooperation partners, and after that we will open up the discussion to guests and key stakeholders from who have joined us today. Robert, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Yvette. Yes, my name is Robert Temel. I'm a freelance researcher, consultant, etc. in the field of architecture and urban planning in Vienna, Austria, and I'm also part of the CoHope research team or the CoHope project team. And what I have been doing during the last year or so in the CoHope project is mainly what I'm going to describe now. The Urban Living Lab that Yvette already talked about, and the manual, as I want to call it, that will be the final result of that. And I'm just going to share a short presentation with you now. Just a minute. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yes, great. Okay, to start with, I do not consider me as the author of this document that some of you already saw in a draft version. but more or less something. I think I'm an editor or something like that, because many people, as you know, and as Ivette already described, worked on that and delivered content to that and improved it. So what I will try to show you now is a manual for future collaborative housing projects, for developing such projects, for the people who do that work of developing such projects. But it is not a manual in the sense of a guideline that contains all the steps that have to be done, like a checklist or something, but it is a collection of recommendations from people who themselves did that work in the past or are doing it right now, and therefore know what to consider and what not. So all these recommendations are of different importance for different projects, of course. Some of them might be relevant for every project, some of them just for some. So the manual should be about what can be learned from existing participatory planning practices from the development of existing collaborative housing projects. And it should, in the end, it should be a practice-oriented guideline to involve future residents of such a project in the development. These are some pictures from the work we did in the different countries, as Ivette already mentioned, Austria, Sweden, France, and in the meantime also Spain. And the structure of this manual mainly is oriented along this timeline that is shown here. The phases of the development of such a collaborative housing project from the very first start phase, when people have the idea of starting a project, going on with planning, with construction, and then the phases that are the goal of this process, of this development, the phases of living in a project, of living in a collaboratively planned house, which we and these phases this time we also separated into 3 different phases. A settling in phase, which is more or less the first 1 or 2 years after people moved in, when they learn how to live together in this house, then the phase of living together itself, and then a redevelopment phase, which means the phase when changes in the material structure, but also in the social structure of such a house take place. What I cannot do now is describe what we collected until today in detail, because it's too much content. I tried to give you an insight and an overview of how this document is structured and what it contains. And this slide here shows the structure of the document. At the beginning, we are talking about applicability, that there are differences between the different countries that participated in the project. The situation in every country is a bit different, and therefore not all recommendations are applicable for every country. Then we go on with describing important concepts, mainly that there exist bottom-up and top-down projects started by the people living in the houses in the future themselves, or by architects, housing developers, whatever. We described the different tenure forms from rent, different forms of rent and of ownership. We described different legal forms, cooperatives, associations, etc., and the different partners that are or might be important in developing such a project. And then we describe the recommendations for the 6 phases. And each phase is firstly very shortly described with what happens in this phase, how long does it take, who are the actors, what are the goals of this phase, and then a list of recommendations, what is important in this phase, what has to be done, and what happens usually there. And that is the last point is important from the point of view of the co-project, where we focus on affordability, health, and social integration, that we also try to collect, recommendations that especially deal with these 3 aspects of projects, how people developing such a project can achieve affordability, can deal with health issues, and can achieve social integration in the project and with its surroundings. Okay, as already mentioned, I can't show everything, but we'll try to show short parts of the recommendations for each of these 6 phases. And that is the structure of the first phase, the start phase, which is the biggest, the longest part of the manual, because all the topics somehow that are mentioned somehow are already described in the start phase, and many things that are also important for later phases are mentioned here. Therefore, it's the biggest part, it's the longest chapter. And in this start phase, recommendations go about the first steps to take in such a project, about the values of people who join in to do such a project, try to focus on. It goes about group composition and group growth. It goes about solidarity and community, also about organization, of course, the important question of workload, of partners, of plots of land, etc. And those, of course, as already mentioned, in more or less every phase, we try to also focus on affordability, health, and social integration. And just to give you an example how this looks like, this is the beginning of the recommendation list for the topic of workload in the start phase. And I give you 3 short examples here for such recommendations. The first one in this topic of workload is make people aware of the work involved, the risks, the framework conditions, don't burn out. You don't have to do everything. So that is gives maybe a hint of how this sounds and how this sounds when you read it. And then a second one, when starting and developing a project, it is not only about meetings, but also about work assignments in between these meetings. For example, looking for properties or land, investigating tenure options, etc. And an important task in this first phase is to gather information, to do research, to visit projects, to read, to collect ideas. And it can be useful to set up a working group for this purpose, structuring information and preparing it for decisions by the whole group. So that's how it looks like and sounds like. And lists like this are provided for each of the phases and for each of the topics in each phase. Okay, and now I will try to shortly give you some examples for one topic for each phase to give you an overview. I start with the topic of group composition in the start phase. Here we talk about that many groups want to achieve a diverse and inclusive group, to be diverse and inclusive. But we also talk about that many of these groups try to avoid too much homogeneity, but agree, but that it is very important that the group agrees on goals and procedures. So a certain level of homogeneity is necessary. The degree of diversity depends on the objectives of projects, because some projects have specific target groups. For example, in Vienna, we have several women's housing projects. Then, of course, the question of diversity is something different than in other groups. We talk about many projects that try to achieve a mix of generations and a mix of people with different socio-economic and culture backgrounds, and that it is possible to achieve the social mix inside the project, but also through networks which go beyond the project itself, so that if a certain level of diversity cannot be reached in the project itself, it is also possible to try that with networks beyond the project. We talk about that framework conditions are very important for the composition of the group. For example, in which kind of language the groups talk with others, try to get new members, etc. And that this question of the social mix might also manifest itself in activities and not only in residency, in people living inside the project. Then the planning phase. There are a few examples about the topic of planning in this phase. We, for example, describe that it's important as a group to develop a common image of the house, also in terms of architecture, of course, in terms of in social terms, but also in terms of architecture. It is important to prioritize what is most important in terms of planning and architecture, and to invest more there while saving on other aspects. It is a central question to decide about if the apartments shall be allocated before they are planned in detail or afterwards, because then you know which one is yours or not in the other case. We talk about that it is important to take into account the future adaptation of apartments when things change, social things change, family constellations change, etc. And we talk about limitation of excessive individualizations and special furnishings in the apartments. Another question that goes beyond planning of the apartments itself is how open does the project want to be? Does it want to invite neighbors? Does it want to provide spaces to invite the public or neighbors? We talk about synergies for common areas and for the programming, and about the question of access to the building. For example, is the access designed in a way that people automatically meet there or not? Then I come to the construction phase, the third phase, the last one before people move in. This is a phase where suddenly a large number of external actors comes into the play. Many decisions have to be made in this phase under high time pressure, so that is a very specific situation, different from the phases before. In this phase, the division of labor within the group can change, of course, because of this high time pressure. And in this phase, also many aspects of projects are re-examined or even discarded because of cost problems, for example. And of course, this is also the transition phase to the building process, which should be given special attention. And this is the phase where the group should consider to make all important, to finalize all important agreements before they move in. Then I come to the fourth phase, the settling in phase. That is the one immediately after moving in, as I mentioned before, the first 1 or 2 years or so, when people learn how to live together, how to use to use and maintain the building together, etc. That is a situation where group organization has to change from planning to ongoing use, of course, where routines emerge in relation to this aspect of living together, to organization, to property care, etc. It is also a phase of trial and error where adjustments are possible with things that do not work out the way they were planned, for example. It is a very specific phase because in this phase, the very important and central goal of all the phases before of the house to be built is lost. Now the group lives together there and doesn't have to develop a project anymore. It has to live the project, but not to develop it, at least not in the same sense as before. And it is quite often it was mentioned in the workshops that this is a phase where the groups should not forget about the community in the moment of moving in, because many people in this situation start to focus very much on their own apartment and on their own family, etc. And community sometimes gets a bit out of focus. And it is also a phase where it has to be decided what parts of the building are used privately and what commonly or publicly. Okay, and there are two more phases. The central one, the most important one, may be the phase of living together. That is the goal of all that has been done before, of course. Finally, now the group is able to enjoy together what it has worked on for years. It is also a phase after the learning phase where the groups start to go outwards again, not all of them, but many of them, where they can promote networking and exchange with the outside through social infrastructure, through services, etc., that bring life into the house. It is a phase where they have to again decide which activities are central to their project, which values, and what are less significant. And it is a phase where the groups have to think that their common areas need permanent attention, need permanent development and redevelopment. And that is also the case why we added the sixth and last phase of redevelopment, which is actually somehow a phase that contains all the others, because this is a phase of living together, but at the same time a phase of changing things while living together. It is meant to be a phase where material things change, like renovation of the building structure after some decades, because it has to be improved again or something like that. But it is also a phase where the social structure should be reconsidered and redeveloped, maybe because things changed and because there are new necessities. Very many discussions in the shops about this phase went about rules for adaptation, that it is very important how to structure the rules for rule adaptation. So how to think in time, if the moment comes that rules have to be adapted, how that could be done by the group. Because many old projects, at least in Vienna, but also some others, had problems with this aspect. It is still a phase where the groups should pay attention to some level of diversity of their residents. It is a phase where the financial balance between older and newer residents becomes again an important issue. And it is a phase where conflict of interest in terms of building renovation can come up. Okay, so that's the end of my presentation. That's the last slide. I just, as mentioned, I cannot talk about everything we collected in this draft document, but I wanted to give you an impression how it is structured, what we offer in this document, and how it could be used maybe for a new project.
Okay, thank you, Robert. Thank you very much for having presenting the cohort participatory process. And now we start with the feedback, and the first person providing feedback is Helena Westholm from Ferrum Arkitekter.
Okay, I read the document that Robert has talked about, and I think it's very full of good advices for new groups and people involved in these processes. And the first pages that you talked about, the limitation of such advices in different countries, that is very important too. And you have written it. It's good that you have these pages in the document, because there will be a lot of difference in legislation and in financing and in different tenor aspects in different countries. But I have some comments in the other parts of the document. And my first was at page 8 under in the start phase. You had under the organization and governance. I think I would like to add that it's important to make clear common ground for influence, to clarify what aspects and in what phase you can have influence. Because that will differ in every project. And the limitation of influence is due to tenor forms, the laws, what the group has for goals and mission with the project, and the finances, etc. So I think it's important to know from the start what influence can I have in this project. And then also in the same part here on start phase workload, that you say that obstacles to keeping members engaged, that people leave the process because it takes too long time to find a plot or a building, and also according to the uncertainty of when can I move in, when will the process be fine. But I think you have missed also that many leaves. I would like to add many big questions during the processes. What will the cost be? What do I have to pay them? So I think that's perhaps the major question for people involved. That during the phase, from the start, you don't know. You can guess the rent or what you should pay, but that will change during the process, and you'll suddenly find that you can't stay in the project because you can't stay because you don't afford or you don't want to put such a lot of money for your living. So that's something you could add. Then you go to the plot of land. You had a part that was called plot of land, I think. And you say something like if the group has access to a plot of land or different, and I would like to add also different grants or money from other parts, they could be more attractive to potential partners, such as housing developers. So that's something to think of for a group to try to get these advantages. To have the power of the land and have also be able to show that you have got grants or things like that that could be good for the financing of the project. Then when we go to the planning phase, I think that's a very long phase. You say this phase takes at least 6 months to a year, and it can sometimes can take considerable longer time. I would say it almost always takes longer time, and I also want to see what includes. You talked about what includes in one way, but you can also think like me as an architect. What is the work that is to be done that you can start building a house? There has to be in sketches. There has been that you are the group and you are and so you are. You think that you have reached sketches, a house you want, or a plot you want, and then there have to be building permit documents. There have to be request documents to get a builder, and then they have, when you get the builder, you have to make the construction documents. So it's a lot of work that has to be done, and that if you include the whole process of this, it will take absolutely more than 6 months to a year. It takes several years to come from the first sketches to start of the building. And that depends naturally of how big the project is. Is it 4 apartments or 59 or 110? And also how difficult the plot is, or the land, or how the contract with the builder looks like. And so that will differ, but I think the work that has to be done during the process is quite a lot. Then it's page 16. I would like to add that you talk about that you should focus on the whole project, not the apartments. I think you write something like that. And I agree really that if you want to make a co-housing project, it's the life you have to describe. What kind of life do you want, and how should the building be done to suit this life that you want to live there, and also the mix of the people being in the mix. So the whole project and the common areas are more important than the own flats, I think. And the mix of apartments is more important. Yeah, the design of each flat should be, at least, I think. And an appropriate mix of apartments can contribute to diversity in the project. Yeah. So, but what is very important is the mix, the sizes, and the mix of the apartments, not the design of each department. And that will decide who lives in the house in the long term, who can move in. Is there a flat that suits me? How could I change if my life is changing? Is there other apartments in the house that are bigger or smaller than the first one? And if I get children, can I stay? If I divorce, can I stay? And these questions. So I think departments should have a general design. They should be possible to furnish in different ways, and they should be accessible for if you're getting sick or old in the house. Rather than that they should that you could take 2 apartments and put to a third one. That is quite complicated in a big house fire cells in things. So if there is a good mix of different sizes, you are prepared for changes in the people's lives. Then also we came to, in that chapter planning phase, I think you have about affordability. And then I think you couldn't underestimate the importance of the tenure form for the affordability. Do the group own the building? Do they rent it? Can they, the very big difference is I don't know, what power you have to decide the rents and the cost in the house, and also to get it more affordable. You could do some. You say that you can make some cleaning, plastering, and things. You could also in the living phase do some gardening, do cleaning stairs and things to get it cheaper. Then in the construction phase, I thought that you write that it's therefore important to form a responsive construction team from the association, a group that could answer quick questions from the builders when to decide. And I think this group should be from also in the planning phase, because there are lots of decisions made, and most of them can go to all the members in the group, but some people, it could be the board, or it could be another building group that could answer the architects or the owner, the project leader of different questions. Well, I think that was my things. Oh, that was what I had written down.
Thank you very much.
I think you have a lot of advices, and it's very many aspects you cover, so it's difficult to find something that is missing.
Yeah, but you found some things.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, I think this question of the duration of the planning phase, you're very right with that. This is definitely too short, what I wrote about it. Yeah, but also all the other aspects. Thanks a lot for.
I had one thing more, and it was in the end of the document. There's something like to make people stay for the affordability in the project. There can come up new costs, and it could be shown that it will be more expensive than you said from the start. And you say something like you have to keep the cost limits so that everyone can stay in the project. And I think you couldn't take away all the qualities just with the goal that everyone should stay in the project, because then there would be lots of qualities that would be taken away from the project. So there's a balance to go to not make people leave, but to not miss the qualities that you have wished in your goals and your program.
Mm.
Yeah, perhaps that can be solved in another way. Direct subsidy to the persons, specific types of persons that have been involved in the group from the very beginning. Okay, but then should we move to Kerstin's recommendations or feedback? You're muted, Kerstin.
Hello, I was looking at the document and then I couldn't unmute because, well, it doesn't function that way. Well, I think this is really a good document. It's interesting. It makes you think on many different aspects. It makes you plan in beforehand. It could be even more of that, but realizing the importance of the decisions you make in different parts of the process and how they affect how the project and your life together will function when you move in. And I like the 3 phases after the planning and designing and construction phase. And that's so important to realize that then it's after you move in that everything actually begins. But you have a lot of work to do before you can get to that point. So I like those 3 phases. There are some things that I would like to have more of, actually. In the start phase, I would like to have more focus on community, because I think that that's what makes most people interested in trying new concepts and new ways of living and forming how they will live together. So a little bit more focus on community, I think would be good. Another aspect that's important from the very beginning is the group's exits process. What happens when someone leaves, and how can new members come into the group? So I think that process with exit and introduction is really important. And of course, one thing that will be of great interest besides the costs, and that is really a problem as we have seen it in Sweden, that the costs are rising so steeply, very close before moving in, and so many people are actually scared away. And those who worked for many years to form a project, they can't afford any longer to move in, but that is perhaps a Swedish problem, because we have no housing policy, no involvement from the state, which makes it really problematic. But the exit and the process how people are coming into the project is really important. And another thing that I think one could stress even more is the importance of learning together, of studying what does it mean to live like this, because most people have no experience of living with common spaces and sharing things and doing things together. So study circles have been very important in the Swedish context, and study visits and discussions about how things could function. And you mentioned this as an important thing of the first phase, to collect information. But I think you could write even more about that, the importance of that, to learn together. In the planning phase, I think that the planning of the social infrastructure after moving in really is important, and that you could stress that a bit more in the really early phases of the process. And another thing that would be interesting to discuss is how can you plan for a greater flexibility. I'm thinking about Slottet in Lund, who has extra rooms that you can rent for a short period. for a year or something like that, depending on your needs. And of course, you have to have a special set of rules who can get the possibility and who have the right to choose first and things like that. But I think the question of flexibility, simple forms of flexibility, is really interesting and worth mentioning. And that's extremely important, since you also says the truth. Things are extremely difficult to change after people have moved in. What you decide before you move in is you are stuck with it, mostly, or I think so at least. So it's so important to be really careful in the beginning, but also to discuss the need of rule adaptation and changes, and how can we be more flexible? How can we be more open to change after moving in? This will be a problem, actually, that people tend to prefer what they always have been doing. And how can one introduce change and adaptation in beforehand? It's worth a try, I think. You are also, when you are talking about planning, you are talking about the question and importance of how people meet in the building. And I think that could be stressed even more, because as we have learned where I live, it's so important with those simple things that makes people stop and change some words and see what others are doing and things like that. So you can't underestimate the importance of meeting places and how the design forwards people's understanding what's going on, seeing what's going on, meeting face to face. I have one thing that I really miss in what you have written. It's a very simple thing. It's storage space for common rooms. I think that that's so important also to give this flexible use a possibility to survive. You have to have a place where you can put away things and then take them when you use them. So storage space should be mentioned. I think so most people forget about them, that they are so important when you have to do things together and take care of common spaces and things like that. Yes, and in the construction phase, I think that the important thing is also to plan for the settlement phase. So you always are one step before. So you need to think over the setting in phase and plan for it in beforehand. It's not something that just happens. You can actually think of different ways of making it happen in a better way. And what you say, that the importance of document all decisions and make them easily accessible, that's so important. So you really, it's easy to find, yes, what have you decided about this question, without making it overwhelming, but only so it's easy to remember what we said together. Yes, I think that's some of my reactions, and I think it's really a good document. It makes you start thinking, and then of course you could add lots of things, but I don't think it shouldn't be bigger. It could perhaps decrease, but still make us think. That's so important. in beforehand, and be a bit more flexible than we actually are. Thank you, Robert. Good work.
Thanks a lot, Kerstin. I have just one small question about what you said. You were talking about the importance of planning of social infrastructure after moving in. Could you a bit expand on that? What exactly do you mean with that?
Yes. I think I really mean the ways you organize things. You also mention it about decision making and how you who is responsible for what and so during when you live in the building, who can decide on what, when, and why, and all those things, and it is, you have it in the document, but you could what I really I'm trying to say is that you always have to be one phase before. So in the phase, one phase, you always have to think of the next also. And your paper does it, but you could stress it.
Okay.
Yes, great. Thank you very much, Kerstin. Perhaps it's good to also mention that this document, we call it, this is a generic. It's like when you buy a car, like the basic. Then we envision that the different countries in the cohort, we will take it, for example, to Sweden, and then we will contextualize it and make it more integrating things that, for example, that Helena also have been mentioning that are particular for Sweden. But let's continue. Now we have the feedback from Catharina Hansson from Arkitektgården. Thank you, Catharina.
Thank you. I just need to mention that I have another appointment, so I will need to leave at 6:10 or something like that. But I'm really happy to be here and partake in this. Generally, I mean, this is a really well-written and thorough document. It's interesting and it's clear, and it was a really nice reading. I have read it with the glasses from a Swedish architect, with the glasses of Swedish building practice, and also with my environmental psychology place attachment glasses. And I have three themes I would like to point out. The first is the architect as a guide or a process leader. In the start phase, it's written something like, it's important that the group learns basic terms and vocabulary used in architecture and construction. And this is self-evident, but it's also challenging. And I think we as a profession need more training here, especially if we talk about a group level while the group is in formation. So we can't expect them to be on the same page. And it's about people's homes, so the most intimate spaces. I think it's one thing to teach people how to explore the tangible or the practical materials and square meters and how to talk about a building in that sense. But a good building is also something that creates joy, wonder, dignity, sense of belonging. And that's through more immeasurable qualities, light, pattern languages, layers, corners. And it would be really interesting to explore how we as a profession can introduce these immeasurable qualities in a heterogeneous group to make sure that they aren't lost. So we as a profession need training here to do a good work, I think. Basically, co-creation is essential, but that in itself doesn't make a qualitative building. It's how the process is done, not just that it is this process. My second point is about the balance between simplification and customization. It makes a lot of sense to streamline the apartments, as the document says, both in terms of affordability and in terms of equality. But I assume that residents not only identify as group members, but also as individuals. And then, of course, you need to express your individuality somehow as well in order to be attached to your private home, but maybe also to the common spaces to some extent. And that kind of raises the question of like, what pockets could we create, or what pockets are there for private customization when we try to streamline something and make it accessible to everyone? And how do you keep that balance between what's common and what's personalized? The document mentions versatile floor plans and the opportunity to put furniture in different ways. Maybe one could add an option of like mobile or flexible walls to an apartment. And to some extent, maybe it's also fine to put up wallpapers or put up paint or that sort of things. But I assume that most of these interventions also cause a higher wear and tear of the apartment than if people just would accept that all apartments look the same, and then you kind of accept the limits, sort of. So I think there's an interesting balance in like, where can you express your personality, or how much do you need to sort of sign up to a more generic home to make this work in a feasible way. And I'm also really curious, someone mentioned that there could have been more written about the common areas. I think it was Kerstin. And I agree with this, because I find a lot of, if I as an architect would come in, this is where I think there would be a lot of loopholes to try to figure out. And I'm really curious about like, to what extent people can contribute individually to the common areas, and how you negotiate the group's customization of the common areas versus something more generic. So how do you make sure that it doesn't look like an institution, but how do you also make sure that one person doesn't take over the common spaces? Like, how do you find the aesthetics of the group, sort of? And the third thing I was thinking of was whether we need to challenge the building code more. This might be more of a Swedish problem, but much of the talking points under health and care are already part of Swedish building code, albeit the code is challenged at the moment. So elevators, air quality, daylight, accessibility for wheelchairs are already non-negotiable. And I also think that common areas in Sweden most likely would need to be accessible at the same level as public buildings. Usually. No? That is excellent. When we have tried to go that way, we have got stuck in 2 by 2 meters toilets and that sort of things. Okay, that's a good one. And Swedish building code also quantifies sizes of everything that goes into an apartment, like kitchen sizes and storage, etc. And parking, of course. And my experience is that many agreements are based on that one apartment is one household. So garbage collection and I think insurance and property value are also somehow tied to the amount of apartments. And then from a Swedish perspective, the question kind of becomes like, how can we define the needs of a new category of housing? Like, what is the difference between co-housing and multifamily housing or regular apartments? And in that way, can we negotiate the cost? If we would count a larger community as one household instead of one apartment. And then also maybe negotiate that one apartment maybe don't need a full-size kitchen if you can share a kitchen in the common areas. Maybe you don't need space for baking in the apartment if that is something you could do together. So that is something that would be really interesting to look into in the Swedish context. What policies and regulations could be challenged to increase affordability? And also how far do we dare to challenge them? Because the risk is that they become norm for more people than intended and that we destroy something for someone else. So smaller kitchens maybe, communal laundry, I assume that's commonplace in Sweden, but to stress that even more. And maybe also start thinking of bedroom sizes that currently need to be based on a tentative wheelchair access. But if a co-housing instead could have, I don't know, guest apartments that have space for a wheelchair, if you temporarily, if you break a leg or something, if you could borrow that guest apartment for those 6 weeks instead of having those meters in your bedroom, maybe that could be of help. And yeah, I'm also really curious about common spaces and how we could make them, how we could negotiate them with fire building codes. How we make them as accessible and as welcoming as possible without too many partitions. And yeah, that is what I had. It's a really nice document. I really enjoyed reading it.
Thanks a lot, Katharina. That was a lot to write for me, but that are very, very useful and interesting comments. Thanks a lot.
I have it in bullet points if you want me to.
That would be great, yes. Actually.
Great. Thank you, Katharina. Now we continue with questions or comments by other guest participants who have not been giving formal feedback to Robert. Questions, comments, just let me know, use the function to raise your hand and I will try to keep the order that you raise your hand. Gunnar, please. Gunnar from Framtiden. You're muted, Gunnar.
Sorry. Thank you for joining. This is the first time I hear this. I will join the conference, so I hope we can have a lot of talks because this document and all comments from these excellent people here are very good. I think I can add quite a lot anyhow because there are more to talk about. I have the experience to live in such a house for 15 years and I've been designing collective houses. I've been working as also for a big housing company that produced this. So I have some experience from different stages of this, and it was very good to put them into different stages. I will not comment the same things as my comrades did here, but something here. The costs for planning. I think we need to talk about that because we have in Sweden what we call bygggemenskap, and I try to start from the beginning and it will cost maybe 50,000 euros something to develop something, and who will pay it, because there is a risk that there will not be anything and people don't have this money. How to accumulate money for that. Also this problem we had in Sweden that before these houses, we could save a bit area from the flat to collect into the common areas and get the same price. But now the flats are so small, so it's not possible anymore. So it is a question, who will pay for the common areas? How much will it cost extra? I think that's a very, very important thing. And another thing is that you don't mention so much about the legal form for the houses. Who will own the houses? Is it a cooperative housing, or is it teamed housing, or is it owned by the people themselves? There is something that is very important, which will construct also how you decide in the house and something like that. Another thing is that in what way will we manage the house, the management of the house? Will it be by voluntary work? And my impression is that people think they will work a lot and they know a lot in the house, but a house worth at least 100 million crowns and cost around 300-400 crowns a square meter to manage is very important that you have a very professional job down there. So, for example, how to decide how will the ventilation system be, and something like that. Yeah, that's some of my point. I'm looking forward to the conference. Then I can spend at least 3 days more to talk about this. It will be very nice. And I hope this conference will be the continuation of this discussion. So I come back then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, actually, Gunnar is traveling to the policy workshop in Lyon. So then and then you will meet Robert and also Ulrika, Kerstin, and myself, and Katharina Meyer. But the discussion in Lyon is on recommendations to policymakers. So we will not discuss this document, but you will have time to discuss directly with Robert, and I will also facilitate we can send the document also to Gunnar. Okay, thank you for that. And the next person is Ulrika.
Yes, thank you very much for this. Well, Robert and everyone else that has been working with this document. I think, as the others said, it's a wonderful job. I have already started, just started to write such a document in Swedish for the Swedish for Sweden. And this document that you have written will be, well, we can almost just translate it, I think. But not totally. And one thing I was thinking of is in the beginning of the document, you talk about that it can be both bottom up and top down processes. But I think the document is, as far as I have seen, only bottom up. And we are already discussing about the Swedish document that we will describe in different chapters, maybe the different ways, the more top down and the more bottom up. Have you thought about that for this document?
Yeah, well, the question is what exactly you mean with bottom up or top down, or on what aspects of it these two terms are related to. What we talk about here are definitely in some way self-organized projects, either in development planning or in living in there, etc. But that is something else than the question who started the project. That is actually what I mean with bottom up or top down. If the project was started from people who will live there themselves or from somebody else.
Yeah, of course, it's mostly in the beginning, in the starting, it can be different. But I think also later on we have, well, maybe you could say we have different variations of bottom-up projects, participating, where you have the processes where you could say that the developer, the builder have very strong thoughts about how this should be, and the group can just discuss some smaller issues, and to the projects where the developer just say what you want and we will build it. So,
yeah, maybe we should specify what exactly we mean with this aspect of bottom up and top down, and what different kinds of that could exist. Yeah.
Good. Anything else, Ulrika, or should we go to Mette? We go to Mette. You're muted, Mette.
Yes. All right. Yes, well, I've been thinking about the whole process in time, because it takes ages, it takes years. And the processes that I followed, I mean, they've been between 8, 9, 10, 12, 13 years. So you have the initiative group, and most of them are gone by the time that people actually move in. And that for many reasons, I mean, life happens. And so I remember when I was writing or looking at the book about the new house in Gothenburg, where Helena was the architect, under samma tak, there were 2 people from the original group who moved in after 9 years. And so this whole thing of decision making, I mean, you know, the initiative group, they work on how we're going to have it, what we're going to do, and then things change there, and then others come. And when it actually happens that people can move in, the rents are so steep that many just can't beat that. And so they have to start all over again when moving in. So this following the process and preparing for being a group and living together may have to start when people move in as well. And so that's that's the time perspective of that, because participatory processes do take ages, also take longer time than one person deciding everything, you know. All right, I'll leave it there. Well, thanks anyway. Great job.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. That is, of course, also the case with many Austrian projects, but not in every case. And the big difference is how access to land works, because in some cases, the city of Vienna offers land for such projects, and then suddenly it goes much faster.
Yes, and then also another issue is that we need to also recognize that architects are not trained to manage this type of projects. There are exceptions like Helena who have done this type of project. So it's also that also delays the processes and not only finding the land, finding the financing. So it's several aspects, but yeah, we need to also. It's important perhaps to also keep some sort of track of, have some sort of that people should know that this process can be extremely long if this and this is not addressed. Perhaps that would be something. Kerstin, you are muted.
In Denmark at the moment, there are quite a few developers who are building co-housing projects with no starting groups at all from the beginning. But then they are looking for ways how to engage those moving in a very late part of the process. And they have had an interesting project where developers met and discussed their problems and what they were doing and what they could learn from one another. And that's interesting. It's not the aim of this project, but I think that it is important to look for many different solutions to make this process both better, so people have a chance to take part and form what they want together, but also to find solutions that also makes it a bit quicker. In the future, if we will have as many bofällesskab, as many co-housing projects as they have at the moment in Denmark, then things might look different also in Sweden. At the moment, it's a big problem with time. There are almost no projects at all. There are no plots. There is no interest from municipalities. It is really a very sad situation, and so many municipalities and others aren't realizing that there is a potential in people who are looking for a different way of living, who are not interested in just buying a home out of nowhere, who would like to engage and actually also pay perhaps a little more than for ordinary housing. But no one has realized that here is a potential exactly at this moment when nothing is built.
Thank you, Kerstin. Any other question? I don't see any hands. I don't know if Ulrika want to say something. Not right now. I don't know if Jenny or Staffan or Katharina have any question.
Hello, everybody. I just want to say I'm here and listening, and I don't have questions right now, but maybe email through Kerstin later if I wonder something. We met yesterday, so we have contact in research projects about collaborative housing. So I'm just here to listen and learn.
Good. If there are not more questions or comments, then we thank all of you in the presentation of the COHOP project. We thank all of you for your interest, your time, and all the feedback. I will stop recording now before closing the session.